From Chris Herren blowing $25,000 a month on OxyContin while starting for the Celtics.
On June 4th, 2008, I was 32 years old. I was in the fight of my life.
To Delonte West getting revived with Narcan on the side of the road.
After that incident, all of a sudden, I became the boogeyman.
In this video, we're diving into the stories of 10 NBA players whose careers got destroyed by their most controversial addictions. Len Bias. We have to start with the one that changed everything, because if you want to understand why the NBA treats substance abuse the way it does today, you have to understand what happened to Leonard Kevin Bias. He was 6'8", 221 pounds of explosive, gravity-defying athleticism out of the University of Maryland, a two-time ACC Player of the Year, whose game was so electric that scouts openly compared him to a young Michael Jordan. In his senior season, he averaged 23.2 points and 7.0 rebounds a game, and by the 1986 NBA draft, he was the consensus best forward in the class. On June 17, 1986, the Boston Celtics, fresh off their third championship in 6 years, took him with the second overall pick. Bias flew to Boston the next day, posed for photos, and was in the middle of negotiating a $1.6 million Reebok deal. He was going to be the heir apparent to a dynasty. He never played a single NBA game. On the night of June 18th, Bias returned to Maryland, and in the early hours of June 19th, in his dorm suite with longtime friend Brian Tribble and teammates Terry Long and David Gregg, he began snorting powdered cocaine. Hours in, he suffered a violent seizure and collapsed. Paramedics were called at 6:32 a.m., and he was pronounced dead at 8:55 a.m., just 48 hours after being drafted. The autopsy confirmed cocaine-induced cardiac arrhythmia.
They told me Len Bias had been doing drugs all the time.
Former NBA player John Sally, who knew Bias personally, reflected on how tragically out of character that reputation actually was.
But I know since we were 15, 16 years old, he was totally against it.
The fallout from that single night rippled outward in ways nobody could have imagined. House Speaker Tip O'Neill, a Boston Democrat with deep Celtics ties, mobilized Congress in a panic, and in just 4 legislative months, President Ronald Reagan signed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, a law so directly tied to this tragedy that many accounts simply call it the Len Bias Law. It introduced mandatory minimum sentences and the infamous 100-to-1 crack-to-powder cocaine sentencing disparity that fueled the war on drugs for decades. The Celtics never recovered either. McHale broke his foot the next season, Bird's body began breaking down, and that dynasty quietly collapsed. Boston would not win another championship for 22 years. Michael Ray Richardson. Before there was a Magic Johnson triple-double craze, there was Michael Ray "Sugar" Richardson, a 6'5" combo guard out of the University of Montana who exploded onto the league in 1978 as the 4th overall pick by the New York Knicks. In 8 NBA seasons, he averaged 14.8 points, 5.5 rebounds, 7.0 assists, and 2.6 steals per game, was named to 4 All-Star teams, led the league in assists as a sophomore, led the league in steals 3 separate times, and earned 2 All-Defensive First-Team honors. He recorded 18 triple-doubles for the Knicks and once came agonizingly close to a quadruple-double with 38 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists, and 9 steals. He was one of the most dynamic guards of his era. And then, cocaine found him. Richardson first tried the drug as a rookie in 1978, a kid from Lubbock, Texas, by way of Denver who had never touched alcohol or marijuana in college, suddenly dropped into the fast-paced social whirlwind of New York City. By the time he was traded to Golden State in 1982, it had become a daily habit. He later described holing up in Oakland hotel rooms smoking cocaine all day, missing team trips over drug debts, watching his life quietly unravel while his body kept showing up for games. Between 1978 and 1985, he entered rehabilitation at least 5 times. And yet, in the middle of all that chaos, he mounted one of the great comeback seasons in NBA history in 1984-85, averaging a career-high 20.1 points per game and earning Comeback Player of the Year. It could not last. On February 25, 1986, at Newark Airport, NBA Commissioner David Stern personally informed Richardson that he had failed his 3rd cocaine test under the league's 3-strike policy and was being banned for life. He became the first active NBA player ever given that punishment. Stern called it a tragic day, nothing less than the destruction by cocaine of a once flourishing career. Richardson later wrote in his 2024 memoir that he had been weak when it came to coke, admitting that once addiction takes over, you don't think you even have a problem. But here is the part that makes his story different. Richardson got clean, stayed sober for over 30 years, became a European basketball legend across Italy, France, and Croatia, winning league titles and cups, and even learning to speak Italian. He went on to coach and win 3 straight CBA championships, and eventually credited David Stern with the very band that ended his NBA career, saying simply, "He saved my life." Sadly, Richardson passed away in November 2025 at age 70 from prostate cancer, but the man who died was not the man who was banned. Roy Tarpley. If ever there was a what if that could make a Dallas Mavericks fan physically ache, it is Roy Tarpley. A 6'11" power forward out of Michigan, Tarpley was drafted 7th overall in the same cursed 1986 draft class that contained Len Bias, and he hit the ground running. By his second season in 1987-88, coming off the bench, he averaged 13.5 points and 11.8 rebounds a night, led the entire NBA in rebounding percentage, and won NBA Sixth Man of the Year in a landslide. He helped push the young Mavericks to the Western Conference Finals for the very first time in franchise history, averaging 15.9 points, 13.0 rebounds, and 2.1 blocks per game over 17 playoff games. He looked like he was about to become a perennial all-star. Then the walls started closing in. In October 1987, Tarpley publicly admitted his cocaine and alcohol problems for the first time and entered treatment. In January 1989, he tested positive for cocaine and was suspended indefinitely, missing 49 games. In November 1989, only 6 games into the new season, he was arrested for DWI and resisting arrest, pleaded guilty, and was suspended another 33 games. In March 1991, he was arrested again for drunk driving, doing 63 miles per hour in a 35 zone with a beer in his hand. In October 1991, he refused a drug test amid reports of cocaine use, and the NBA handed him his first lifetime ban. The story should have ended there, but Tarpley clawed his way back into the league, was reinstated for the 1994-95 season, and signed a 6-year, $20 million deal with the Mavericks. Across 55 games, he averaged 12.6 points and 8.2 rebounds. But in December 1995, he tested positive for alcohol multiple times, violating his court-mandated zero-tolerance aftercare program. The NBA hit him with a second and permanent lifetime ban. He had missed more than 400 games across his career to suspensions. Tarpley rebuilt overseas, starring for Aris Thessaloniki and Olympiakos in Greece, winning the FIBA Supporter Cup as the competition's top scorer in 1992-93, leading the EuroLeague in rebounding and winning a Greek League championship. In 2007, he sued the Mavericks and NBA, arguing addiction was a disability protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the case settled out of court in 2009. On January 9, 2015, Tarpley died at age 50 in an Arlington, Texas hospital, with multiple reports attributing his death to liver failure, widely believed to be the long-term toll of his years of alcohol and drug abuse. A Hall of Fame career, scouts once said. Instead, a cautionary tale. Chris Washburn. In 1986, Dean Smith once called Chris Washburn the best 17-year-old player he had ever seen. That is a sentence that should open onto a Hall of Fame career, and instead, it opens onto one of the biggest busts in NBA history. The 6'11" center out of North Carolina State was selected 3rd overall in the 1986 draft by the Golden State Warriors, picked immediately after Brad Daugherty and the tragic Len Bias. Expectations were enormous. Instead, the 1986 class would go down as one of the most cursed in league history. Washburn played just 72 regular season games across 2 NBA seasons, averaging a brutal 3.1 points and 2.4 rebounds per game on 41.2% shooting. In his rookie year, he played 35 games for Golden State before checking into a Van Nuys, California rehab clinic in January 1987 after admitting to a cocaine problem. He returned late in the season, but was never effective again. In 1987-88, he played 37 games split between the Warriors and Atlanta Hawks after a mid-season trade. And in September 1988, he was suspended without pay after a second positive drug test. A third failed test in June 1989 triggered the lifetime NBA ban under the league's 3-strike substance abuse policy. He was 24 years old. What makes Washburn's story particularly gutting is how intertwined it was with the rest of this list. He later admitted he had started using cocaine in college, and Washburn blew through his entire rookie contract, more than $1 million, on drugs, cars, houses for family, and reckless spending. once saying he hated sitting in folks' houses and getting high with no lights on. Sports Illustrated in 2005 ranked him the second biggest bust in NBA history. But unlike many of his peers, Washburn's story does not end in tragedy. After years of homelessness in Houston, where he lived in abandoned buildings and crack houses and served prison time from 1991 to 1994 for drug offenses, his turning point came around the year 2000 after his father passed away, and full sobriety took hold around 2010 to 2012. Today, he lives in his hometown of Hickory, North Carolina, runs a motivational speaking company called CW Enterprises, operates a shuttle service called Park and Go Karts, and in 2025, co-wrote the memoir Out of Bounds: From Broken In, Be a Dreams to Redemption. He is married, has 2 college basketball prospect sons, and says he would not change a single step of his path. John Drew. Before Michael Ray Richardson became the first active player banned for life, before Chris Washburn became the face of the cursed 1986 draft, there was John Drew, the man who quietly set the precedent for every single one of those punishments. Drew was a 6'6" swingman out of Gardner-Webb University, drafted by the Atlanta Hawks in 1974, and he became one of the most explosive scorers of the 1970s. Across 11 NBA seasons and 739 games, he averaged 20.7 points and 6.9 rebounds per game. He earned NBA All-Rookie First-Team honors in 1975, was a 2-time All-Star in 1976 and 1980, and posted 5 separate seasons of 20-plus points per game in Atlanta, peaking at 24.2 in 1976 to 77. The man could score in his sleep. Drew reportedly first tried cocaine during the 1977 to 78 season when the Hawks were visiting Portland. By 1980, around the time of his second All-Star appearance, he was not only using, he was cooking it. He entered a 28-day detox program 3 separate times while the Hawks tried to help him manage it. Eventually, convinced the problem was Atlanta itself, Drew requested a trade, and in September 1982, the Hawks sent him to the Utah Jazz in exchange for a young unknown named Dominique Wilkins. That is, in fact, how the human highlight film ended up in Atlanta. At the start of the 1983 season, Utah coach Frank Layden confronted Drew about his drug addiction, and 2 hours later, Drew was on a flight to Baltimore for an intensive 8-week detox program. The cycle continued. Drew entered multiple treatment programs, relapsed repeatedly, faced arrests for drug possession and bad checks, and by January 1986, while playing in the Continental Basketball Association after being waived by the Jazz, he was judged a 3-time offender under the NBA's new substance abuse policy. Commissioner David Stern permanently banned him for life, making John Drew the first player ever banned under the league's aggressive new anti-drug rules. 1 month later, Richardson got the same punishment. A few years later, so did Washburn and Tarpley. Drew himself warned that the policy as written would backfire, saying it will keep guys from coming forward because players would be afraid that seeking help would count as a strike against them. After the ban, Drew briefly thrived in the CBA, named Newcomer of the Year in 1986, averaging 25.9 points per game, but he never returned to the NBA. Legal trouble followed, including a 1986 arrest for attempting to buy cocaine from an undercover officer, and he eventually settled in Houston, working various jobs including as a taxi driver. He reportedly gained control of his addictions later in life and passed away on April 10, 2022, at age 67 from bone cancer. Delonte West. Of all the stories on this list, Delonte West's is perhaps the one that has hurt NBA fans in the most sustained, public, and agonizing way. A 6'4" combo guard out of St. Joseph's University, West was drafted 24th overall by the Boston Celtics in 2004 and went on to carve out a respectable 8-year NBA career. Over 397 games, he averaged 9.7 points, 2.9 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and 1.1 steals, and at his peak, he was LeBron James's starting shooting guard on a 66-win Cavaliers team in 2008 to 2009. West's battles started long before the league knew. He grew up in poverty in Prince George's County, Maryland, was bullied relentlessly for his mixed heritage, and after a middle school leg injury, he moved in with his father in Virginia, where he began self-harming, abusing prescription drugs, and making multiple suicide attempts as a teenager. In 2008, while with the Cavaliers, after a public outburst during a preseason scrimmage, West was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was open about it at first, talking candidly in interviews.
When I first got diagnosed with bipolar, my first response was, what does that mean?
The pressure of managing a mental health condition alongside NBA life, combined with a quietly worsening substance abuse problem, made the situation nearly impossible to stabilize. Then came the arrest that changed how the public saw him forever. On September 17, 2009, West was pulled over in Fort Washington, Maryland, riding a three-wheeled motorcycle with a loaded 9mm Beretta in his waistband, a .357 Magnum revolver strapped to his leg, and a Remington 870 shotgun in a guitar case slung across his back. He claimed he was moving the guns at his mother's request because children had found them. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges, got home detention, and the NBA suspended him 10 games. After being waived by Dallas in 2012, he bounced around China, the D-League, and Venezuela before officially retiring in 2015. He had earned roughly $16 million, and most of it was gone. What came next was the part nobody wanted to watch. In 2016, a photograph surfaced of West panhandling in Temple Hills, Maryland. In 2020, viral videos showed him shirtless in handcuffs after a street fight, rambling incoherently, and shortly after, more viral photos captured him begging for money in North Dallas. The NBA world was stunned. Mavericks owner Mark Cuban personally picked West up from a gas station, paid for rehab, and provided housing. West stabilized briefly, then relapsed and relapsed and relapsed again.
After that incident, all of a sudden, I became the boogeyman.
The stigma followed him through arrest after arrest, overdose after overdose. In June 2024, officers administered Narcan after he collapsed during a chase. In November 2025, he was found unconscious on the side of a road in Fairfax County and revived with Narcan. But by early 2026, he was celebrating 30 days sober, and in March 2026, 100 days in a Florida wellness program. The NBA community still roots for him. Lamar Odom. Lamar Odom was one of the most versatile forwards of his era, a 6'10" weapon who won back-to-back NBA championships with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2009 and 2010. He was married to Khloe Kardashian, a fixture on reality television and beloved around the league. But underneath that gleaming Hollywood surface was a man dealing with trauma that had never healed. Odom's mother died of cancer when he was 12. His father was a heroin addict, and Odom had been carrying that weight, numbing it with cocaine, alcohol, and other substances for years.
Addicted to coke.
That was my girlfriend. I had a wife and cocaine.
That combination of trauma, fame, and untreated addiction culminated in one of the most infamous celebrity medical emergencies of the 21st century. On or around October 10th, 2015, Odom checked into Dennis Hoff's Love Ranch, a legal brothel in Crystal, Nevada, about 80 miles outside Las Vegas. He spent roughly $75,000 on a VIP suite and 2 women, and over the next 3 days, he consumed a catastrophic combination of substances, including cocaine, an over-the-counter herbal sexual performance supplement called Reload 72 Hour Strong, that he took 10 to 12 times when the recommended dose was 1 per 24 hours, and unidentified pills witnesses saw him take from a plastic bag. On the afternoon of October 13th, 2 sex workers found him unresponsive in his suite. He had stopped breathing properly. A staff member called 911.
Where's your emergency? You need an ambulance?
Paramedics rushed Odom to Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas, where he was placed in a medically induced coma and remained critical for nearly 4 days. The medical picture was apocalyptic. His kidneys failed. He had a collapsed lung. By Odom's own accounts, he suffered 6 heart attacks and 12 strokes over the course of the ordeal. The doctors themselves could not medically explain how he was still alive.
He has had multiple strokes in the hospital.
Lamar's in a coma, on a ventilator.
Khloe Kardashian, despite the fact that the couple had filed for divorce, dropped everything, flew to Vegas with her family in tow, and took over his medical decisions. The Kardashian-Jenner machine and the entire tabloid ecosystem descended on the story. Helicopters circled the hospital. Odom topped Google's most searched list of living people in 2015. Miraculously, Odom survived. His recovery has been anything but linear, marked by multiple rehab stints, relapses, and reinventions. In January 2026, he was arrested in Las Vegas for DUI and speeding, after which he immediately entered a 30-day program at I Rely Recovery Center in Los Angeles. By late March 2026, around the premiere of the Netflix documentary Untold: The Death and Life of Lamar Odom, he announced he was nearly 60 days completely sober. He now owns the Odom Wellness Treatment Center in California and speaks openly about addiction as a brain disease. Chris Herren. Chris Herren's story is the kind of story that can break you if you sit with it too long. He was a McDonald's All-American out of Fall River, Massachusetts, a kid who appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a Boston College freshman, got kicked out of BC for drug issues, transferred to Fresno State, and was eventually drafted 33rd overall by the Denver Nuggets in 1999. He played 70 NBA games across 2 seasons, and the entire time, He was at war with substances that had started at 14 with alcohol, escalated to cocaine at 18, then to prescription painkillers like OxyContin and Vicodin, and finally to heroin. His rookie season with the Nuggets was actually manageable, largely because veterans like Nick Van Exel and Antonio McDyess kept him accountable on road trips. But in 2000, when he was traded to his hometown Boston Celtics and realized his childhood dream of becoming a starter, everything came apart. He burned through up to $25,000 a month on OxyContin. One infamous moment, on November 15, 2000, captures the whole nightmare in a single image. He stood outside the Fleet Center in full Celtics uniform, in pouring rain, waiting on his dealer's car, instead of warming up for his second start as a Celtic. When the NBA released him, he played overseas in Italy, Turkey, Germany, Poland, and China. With OxyContin harder to come by, he turned to heroin. He overdosed at least 4 times. In 2004, he was charged with heroin possession after passing out in a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. On June 4, 2008, in Fall River, he crashed his car into a utility pole after a heroin binge and was pronounced dead for 30 seconds before paramedics revived him. Herren has told that story many times since.
On June 4th, 2008, I was 32 years old. I was in the fight of my life.
That day was the beginning of the end of his active addiction.
Jumped in my car, I drove, I parked on a side street, he threw him through my window.
His 2011 ESPN 30 for 30 documentary Unguarded, directed by Jonathan Hawk, unflinchingly exposed what the darkest side of NBA addiction actually looked like. It showed a man who chased dealers in uniform, who funded a 7-figure habit with his NBA salary, who carried a double life as elite athlete by day and, in his own words, roadkill by night. The film was Emmy-nominated and sparked national conversations about substance abuse in sports. Herren has been sober since August 1, 2008, which, as of 2026, is approaching 18 years. He channeled the pain into purpose. He founded the Herren Project in 2012, opened Herren Wellness Recovery Centers in Massachusetts with his wife Heather in 2018, and speaks 250 times a year to students, athletes, and communities about what he calls the first day rather than the last day of addiction. He has reached over 2 million people with his story. Rex Chapman. Chapman was born in Bowling Green, Kentucky in 1968, into a state so obsessed with basketball that he was dunking before his sophomore year of high school. He starred at the University of Kentucky, earning All-American honors, and was drafted 8th overall by the Charlotte Hornets in 1988. Over 12 NBA seasons, he averaged 14.6 points per game and earned between $40 and $54 million in salary. But Chapman's career was also defined by injuries. He missed roughly 250 games and underwent 10 surgeries, including 7 in his final 4 years with the Suns. Those surgeries were the hinge on which his entire life swung. Chronic pain led to opioid prescriptions. Around 2000, after one surgery, Chapman was given a 30-day supply of OxyContin. By his own account, within 2 days, he was in love with it. At his peak after retirement, he was taking up to 40 Vicodin and 9 OxyContin a day, sometimes as many as 50 pills total, later switching to Suboxone to manage withdrawal. He has described the drugs as making him feel invincible at first, calling that feeling the biggest lie there is. The addiction lasted roughly 15 years. Running parallel to the opioids was a gambling addiction that he described as even harder to overcome, because it fed the same addictive brain chemistry in a way that legal structures could not reach. Chapman estimates he lost between $10 and $20 million through casinos, blackjack tables, and racetracks, sometimes blowing nearly $400,000 in a single Vegas session. By 2013, he was bankrupt and living out of his El Camino. Rock bottom came on September 19, 2014, when Chapman was arrested in Scottsdale, Arizona, for allegedly stealing more than $14,000 in Apple products from the Scottsdale Quarter Apple Store on 7 separate occasions. He used the self-checkout app on his iPhone to make it look like he was paying, then walked out and pawned the goods for cash to fund his habits. He faced 9 counts of organized retail theft and 5 counts of trafficking in stolen property, all felonies. Chapman later said he had no memory of the thefts because of his opioid fog. He pleaded guilty to 4 counts of theft in 2015 and received 18 months of probation, restitution to Apple, and 750 hours of community service. The mugshot went national, and it finally forced him into his last successful rehab stint. Chapman entered a 28-day program at the Brook in Louisville, followed by sober living in Houston with John Lucas, a fellow recovering addict and former NBA player. He has been clean from opioids since 2014. His reinvention has been one of the most improbable in sports. He became a wildly popular social media personality with his daily block or charge videos, amassing over 1 million followers, and in 2025 released his memoir, It's Hard for Me to Live With Me, co-written with journalist Seth Davis. Jontay Porter. The most recent entry on this list is also the one that feels most uniquely modern because it is the first major NBA gambling scandal of the legalized sports betting era. Jontay Porter, born November 15, 1999, is a 6'10" forward and the younger brother of Denver Nuggets star Michael Porter Jr. He had battled multiple ACL tears at Missouri, bounced around the G League, and finally signed a two-way contract with the Toronto Raptors and their G League affiliate Raptors 905 in December 2023. In 26 NBA games, he averaged 4.4 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 2.3 assists. On April 17, 2024, the NBA permanently banned him for life, the first player banned for gambling violations since the 1950s point-shaving era. The league's investigation uncovered 3 distinct breaches. First, Porter disclosed confidential information about his own health status to individuals he knew to be active NBA bettors. Second, he intentionally limited his own participation in games, exiting at least one early specifically to influence prop bets on his own performance. Third, between January and March of 2024, he placed at least 13 bets on NBA games through an associate's online betting account. Those wagers ranged from $15 to $22,000 apiece, totaling about $54,000 wagered, yielding net winnings of roughly $22,000. None involved games he played in, but 3 parlays included Raptors games where he bet on Toronto to lose. The smoking gun was a game on March 20th, 2024, against the Sacramento Kings. Before tip-off, Porter disclosed his health status to a known bettor. An associate then placed an $80,000 same-game parlay at DraftKings that would have paid $1.1 million if Porter underperformed on his player props. Porter played 3 minutes, went 0 for 1 from the field with 2 rebounds, and left the game citing illness. The bet was immediately flagged, frozen, and never paid out. Licensed sports betting operators and independent integrity monitors flagged the Porter activity to the NBA in late March 2024. On April 10th, Commissioner Adam Silver publicly called the allegations a cardinal sin. On April 17th, the lifetime ban came down. On July 3rd, Porter was indicted in the Eastern District of New York for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and on July 10th, he pleaded guilty. The scandal triggered the so-called Jontay Porter rule, restricting certain player prop bets on two-way and lower roster players, and reignited a massive public debate about the NBA's multi-billion-dollar partnerships with sports betting operators. Critics accused the league of hypocrisy, profiting enormously from gambling while imposing the harshest possible penalty on a fringe player. Porter has expressed remorse and, as of early 2026, signed with the relaunching USBL's Seattle Superhawks. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.